Welcome back to Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift for the Pyrenees Stage 1 recap. This is one of the most stacked start lists we've ever seen for Pyrenees, with the Tour de France champion and the runner-up, and the previous 2 years Tour de France champion, Pogacar and Vingegaard, going head-to-head, both in good shape after Andalusia and Gran Camino. This is actually quite rare, unfortunately, for cycling. Contador and Froome, I don't know. That's the only other two GC contenders I know in the history of cycling. Two big guns going head to head like this is a treat. So it's a huge race, but stage 1 is one of those, looks like a boring sprint stage. Nothing is boring in Pyrenees. La Verrière to La Verrière, do you know how you say it? 170 k's long. They have these rolling hills, so much road furniture, outskirts of Paris, super cold. 500 meters, 11.6%, Benji, that little Cat 3 with 20 k's to go. And then there's an intermediate sprint with 1500 meters, 5%, with 6 bonus seconds. Is that like some new thing? Double intermediates?
A new thing. I had Marc Sergeant, ex-team manager of Lotto, tell me that it was a new thing. I'm not sure if they're going to do it for the Tour, but it's rumored that it might also be in the Tour, so that would be intriguing. But hey, it's quite intriguing. Hey, the parcours, initially I was like, this could be a sprint, but I also get Calais vibes from this, or I would say Pyrenees Stage 1 2022 vibes, where a team could try something on these hills, but they won't get the split ups that we had in those other two instances because the climb is shorter and maybe not as hard on paper either. So I was expecting some action on it, but I wasn't expecting a group that could actually get away on them for the rest of the race. Did that make sense?
Yeah, last year's, they were 1.2Ks, 7%, and they were sort of back to back. They're a little bit longer. Jumbo-Visma brought pretty much only rouleurs. Same with UAE. UAE, I think, brought every rouleur on their roster. Oliveira, Bjerg, Novak, Trenton, Wellens, plus Grosschartner's climbing support. Jumbo's team's not as good as last year. Wout out, Coy in, Laporte out, Tratnik in, and who else did they have? Turnison out, Foss in. So there's really not much climbing support except
No lead out?
and Affini's the lead out, I guess, but he did the lead out before the climb, so he can't do both. And Van Hooydonk's on triple duty. So clearly both these teams know you can lose Paris-Nice before you get to the mountains, before you get to the sun. In the TTT, which is coming up in stage 4, we'll preview that at the end of stage 3's podcast. That's where all the time gains can be made, or controlling these really difficult, dangerous, stressful flat stages. But this was a sprint. We have here Bennett, Coquard, who else? Coy, as I mentioned, Matthew Sword of Demar, Merlier, DeLee. What's his official nickname?
I don't know, DeLee. I think, wasn't it something related to a bull?
What's
or was
the bull
that
in French?
Toro or something like that? Toro? I don't know, man. You're asking me. I'm West Flemish.
Toro. All right. He's a bull.
Yeah, he's a bull. That's the only thing we'll go for. Like, I was curious what's going to happen, because if the race is made a tiny bit harder on these tiny hills, then the race could lean more towards the Pedersen, towards the lead, than a pure flat sprinter like Merlier. So it depends on how hard the race is ridden and how the teams surrounding the pure sprinters ride the race. If they stay with their sprinter and make sure they stay close to the front of the race, then those sprinters can actually make it to the final here. And we've had a nervous peloton today. That's the least we can say, because Pyrenees, these first few stages, always has something happen, whether it's echelons or whether it's the narrow sections between certain villages and so forth. And here was the narrow sections that really seem to have orchestrated the teams of the GC riders to try and keep their GC riders at the front. We saw both UAE and Jumbo-Visma doing that. And yeah, still crashes happened, because that's what happens when nervous pelotons go through narrow roads. I think Gernalek was the biggest victim of the crash we saw there. No big names in the crash, I would say, but Grosschartner, Domestique of UAE, you're right. That's a notable name in that crash. But after that, we were all heading towards the final 21 kilometers where the action would happen. But I guess I should throw it back to you to talk about Zwift for a second.
I'm back. I'm back on Zwift. You saw me this morning on Zwift. -9 degrees outside. No, thank you. Perfect for my Zwift setup. Cruising around, burning, getting my calories in. Make sure you join the LRCP Zwift Club. Benji and I will be doing some ad hoc Zwift Club rides this year. It's both
Yes.
Zwift is important for both our weight loss goals. If you want to check it out and get your free 7-day trial, go to the link down below and sign up and test it out. And if you want to jump in and jump on, you don't have a direct drive trainer, the Zwift Hub is your perfect companion for that at $4.99. I thought, Benji, that UAE. So we're going into this 20K to go climb. It's the harder of the two. More likely there'll be splits. I thought UAE were going to do what Jumbo did last year in Paris when
Yep.
they got set up, because UAE looked way. Ineos came forward early and then faded. They came forward in like waves, couldn't hold position, came back. What an upgrade it seemed to me. Trenton and Wellens, who weren't at the Tour last year, is a huge upgrade for Pogacar in this sort of terrain. And they had him at the front. And I thought, and I was surprised they didn't, Benji. I thought they were just going to launch this climb. They entered in first 6 wheels and they kind of were waiting for someone else to attack.
Maybe the fact that it's at 20 kilometers from the finish line is the reason that they don't
True.
pull it up completely. Now, when it comes to Jumbo last year, that was closer to the finish line, and it was a harder climb than this one, for example. It's still notable enough because we did see moves from GC riders there. It wasn't UAE. They did have him at the front. I felt like Jumbo was the team that was the most outpositioned on this climb. And when Nelson Paulus went in his pink jersey for EF, he goes from the front. Pogacar counters that in his wheel, but doesn't necessarily go over the top instantly. And I was like, where's Jonas Vingegaard? Where's Jumbo Visma? And I have to look in the distance and I see Vingegaard basically isolated already on this smaller climb. And this shows that Jumbo does not have the team for these climbs to try and launch it in the same way that they had it last year, like you mentioned. The Van Aerts and the Laportes and so forth are not here. It's the rouleur types that are here in this race. And that says quite a bit for this race. And I think the reason is mainly the team time trial, let's be honest about it. But I would say that Pogacar didn't seem like he wanted to all out go for it, but he had a moment of doubt.
He seemed hesitant, right?
He like went past Paulus just like a few hundred meters before the top of this climb, and then kind of looked at Paulus, and then like went back behind Paulus again. Did you think they had like a conversation of, mate, you want some KOM points or no?
Yeah, well, that's the only thing I could think, because I was like, Pogacar could keep this going if he wanted to. And that hesitation, and maybe he thought there'd be more riders. I don't know. Maybe he was hoping for, to be honest, I mean, UAE just closed this up. Like, I was expecting Trek to launch it. I was expecting Lotto to launch it because the break had been caught. Because you got to drop one guy and you got to keep him behind. His name's Tim Merlier. And there's actually Arnaud Demar, who was the best sprinter. He came third on the KOM sprint for FDJ, which is crazy. He entered in good position.
Hey. And a few years ago, there was a Pyrenees stage 1 where there were these kind of hills towards the end after a harder stage. And who was fighting each other? Julien Alaphilippe, the puncher, and Arnaud Demar, the sprinty, punchy guy at that point. 1v1.
Demar's 1 minute.
That was amazing. Really back in the day, amazing.
His 1 minute is really good. Like on Paris Tour or even Paris-Roubaix, he's come top 10, I think. Not that that's 1 minute, it's a completely different effort. But Demar is, when he's on, he's on. He's actually, it's his pure sprints been a bit meh recently. And a group forms, we'll have to go and look back, Benji, but there was never any clarification on who was in the group. We knew Pogacar was there. We knew there were very few yellow Jumbo Visma jerseys. In fact, there was one, Vingegaard, and I presume Pedersen was there. It would be weird if he wasn't. Bennett was there. Demar was there. I assume Dali was there. And yet only FDJ really came to the front after a long time to start pacing. And it was Arkea and Quickstep pacing from behind because Merlier had been dropped. And I was like, wow, Merlier off the back. And yeah, it didn't stick.
I agree that those teams, the ones with the more versatile sprinters, could have done much more at this point in the race, and maybe even on the next hill to try and make this harder for the actual pure sprinters in this start list. But this group was also too large to continue going in itself, because if only one team's going to keep going, which is the Demar team, then suddenly people are going to start looking at each other and moves start happening. And a small move did go for a second, which was a group with a UAE rider in it, not Pogacar. And then Pogacar tried to bridge from the Vingegaard group to the front group, and it wasn't Vingegaard closing it. It was a rider doing it with Vingegaard in the wheel, which was kind of surprising. But I think Jonas would have been like very happy with that someone else is closing Pogacar for him. But that came back together, and this group really went nowhere. And I think Paulus wasn't happy with that because he went again afterwards.
Strong counterattack, getting aero. He got 20 seconds whilst Tratnik moved to the front. He was getting Jumbo then. Their plan was to be in position for the last climb, which was, let me do some reverse maths, 7Ks from the finish, but not as hard as last year. I don't know. I feel like Jumbo gambled a little bit with that second last harder climb. It didn't burn them too much, to be honest. And UAE spent a lot of their riders. And then coming into this last climb, it was Jumbo who looked like they had all the riders, and they were pacing into the base with Van Hooydonk, Affini. Jonas into the run-in was caught really far back. We'll say Pals was 20 seconds ahead. Quickstep were pacing. It's sort of the peloton got organised, but there was... Yeah, it took a while for Van Hooydonk to bring Vingegaard back to the front. Pogacar was getting into the Jumbo train, which is not surprising because they were doing the lead out. But 6 bonus seconds on offer, Benji. How do you stop Pog getting 6 bonus seconds at the end of 1.5 Ks, 5%?
Well, Jonas Vingegaard will have a hard time doing it, so I guess you get your teammates to try and surprise Pogacar in some form, and it looked like that was happening, or was that the reason that what was happening
Not
occurred?
at the base.
Because I agree, Jumbo initially, from the bottom, had their train on there. UAE went over it. Went over that train with Trenton going on the left side, and the other part of the team came on the other side, and the Jumbo team was basically blocked in at that point before the sprint even started. So
to me, it looked like Jumbo were nursing Koi, and they weren't pacing the climb full gas. Maybe I'm wrong, it's hard to tell, but to me, they weren't doing like a lead out. They certainly weren't doing a reverse lead out with Tratnik to make Pogacar chase. He sort of tried that much later. I mean, at the base, to me, it looked like their plan was stay in good position, make sure Koi gets over the climb so he can go for the sprint. And I mean,
what happened?
I don't want to hear. You don't need to get a coffee, maybe a little espresso, but I don't want to hear about anymore about Olav Koi not getting chances at Jumbo-Visma. Maybe the most prestigious after the Dauphiné 1 week World Tour race in the world. Back defending Tour de France champion, and the team is going for Koi from what I can tell.
Yeah, but with what team? Like, he's got no lead out, so that counters that though, right?
Him. No, but I'm saying...
Affini helped him. Come on.
I mean, he started a sprint in good position. I'm just saying, maybe it didn't make a difference. Maybe if he wasn't there, they approached the climb exactly the same way. I don't know. No. I'm just saying, the guy got an opportunity today. Pyrenees Stage 1, he got an opportunity with Tour de France champion in the team. So
I agree that when it comes to the climb itself, they should not focus on Koi. Koi should be on survival mode while the GC is being fought out. If he gets over it, he gets over it, and they go for Koi afterwards. That's how I see that. But in the grand scheme of things, the opportunities that he's getting, he's not getting with the best lead out. Tosh van der Sande did get him in decent positions at the UAE Tour, but Tosh van der Sande is not the best lead out remotely close to it in the world. And when it comes to Pyrenees, he's got a team with Affini doing work with him. So I perhaps disagree with chances because I feel like he doesn't get the full opportunities that he will get at a team that is fully in support of him. But does he deserve full support?
Yeah, that's what who deserves that? Melier?
Yeah. Deli?
Pedersen?
Groenewegen? Depending on the race.
Yes.
That's where it gets a bit iffy.
It's a short list.
When it comes to Koi, last year I would have said 100% he deserves his own, like, train or something. And in certain teams, he would get that. But at Jumbo, he won't get that. And at Jumbo, he kind of doesn't deserve that because his goals of winning stages are irrelevant compared to GC with Vingegaard.
Yeah. Anyway, probably it made no difference to anything. What ends up happening is we get to the last 500 meters. It's been a little bit cagey. Tratnik tries to do a reverse lead out. It kind of ends up being like Roglic's attack on stage 7 in the Tour last year, where he just gives Pogacar a lead out.
Yeah.
And when he sees Pogacar in the wheel, he should absolutely stop and force Pogacar to launch earlier. Did it really make a difference? No, I don't think so. Pogacar absolutely ruins everybody, drops, I think Vingegaard was in his wheel, just like gets separation, takes 6 seconds. I don't know who took the other.
So, an Age Desert rider and Latour, I think. Latour takes 4. I think Age Desert rider outsprinted Vingegaard for 3rd. So Vingegaard takes 0 seconds while Pogacar takes 6. So that's a notable thing already in advance for the team time trial. And I think Pogacar will be happy with those seconds. But it wasn't done yet, Because Pogacar was like, I'm bored. Let's keep going. And Latour was like, oh, TV, Total Energy, very happy with that. Okay, so let's go. And that was a 2-minute attack. And then Vingegaard was like, oh, Pogacar's going. I need to get on the damn wheel.
Yeah.
And he closed it as well. But Vingegaard was never going to take over. He's got 2 reasons not to. Coy, if that's in his mind. But next to that, why would he do it if he knows he's going to get beaten on the line anyway for bonus seconds?
Exactly. He sits in, and once he's sitting in, that means that Pogacar and Latour, they pull a couple of rotations, but then Quickstep get organised behind. It's 5Ks to go. Pogacar's not going to pull the whole time to get caught anyway, probably in the last kilometre. So they stop. I mean, Pogacar here to race, exciting. I mean, even with these little climbs, how exciting it was, how there were splits already. Pogacar sprint, like the stage of the 7 kilometre, 7% climb. He's going to be very, very, very difficult to beat, perhaps impossible to beat on that finish with Wellens and Grosschartner leading him out. But yeah, Quickstep got organised. Teams are thinned out a bit, though. There's no 5-man trains because we've had these little hills. We have more sprinter with one guy. Trek had numbers, but people are tired. They can't do their normal length of pull. Skelmoser is pulling into the last K, which is, I thought he was going for GC, and he was doing a good lead out for Trek. And Mosca was there before, I think, pulling. Quickstep, it was Schmidt, Lampard, Benji. Maybe I missed it. I need to look back, but Lampard's lead out's not impressed me this year.
I didn't even notice he was part of the lead out today.
He was on Schmidt's wheel.
I'll be honest.
Before Seneschal.
Because in the past, we would notice when Lampard was doing lead out because it was a proper length of a lead out. In Algarve last year, an example of that. But here it wasn't necessarily noticeable. And I feel like the lead out when it comes to Quickstep was just keeping the team at the front against lead outs that weren't necessarily all out strong either, but they were sitting in the wheel relatively easily of that Quickstep train. But the corners into the last kilometer were a bit difficult though, because then you get certain gaps opening up for certain riders and so forth. And I feel like we got that Quickstep train going into the final kilometer. Trek was sitting just behind Quickstep at that point. Bora was kind of in the middle of that. And suddenly the camera changes for me, or my eyes were closed for a tiny bit. I don't know which of the two it was. But then Seneschal had a bit of a gap after a corner. And then Bora was trying to close Seneschal. So a reverse lead out by Seneschal.
Yeah, Merlier let his wheel go because Merlier was going to be left on the front so early. I think even Schelmoser had been in front of Merlier, and then Schelmoser flicked him, and Merlier was like, nah, I'll be on the front way too early. And he let Seneschal's wheel go. Genius move. Seneschal also knows to go on with it. And then Van Poppel has to launch early. Merlier then comes back. He fights Coy for Bennett's wheel, and just everyone wants Bennett's wheel. Because Van Poppel's going to deliver you. Because Van Poppel does the right thing. He closes Seneschal really fast. He's still able to do his lead out afterwards. But it means Merlier's not on the front too early. And everyone wants to be on Bennett's wheel because Van Poppel's going to deliver Bennett in good position 90% of the time. Coy actually fights Merlier off his wheel, which I was surprised to see. So Coy's sitting pretty on the exactly where you'd sort of draw it up. Merlier takes Coy's wheel, and then Coy tries to jump Bennett. He hits the wind, doesn't go anywhere. Merlier comes out of Coy's wheel and just absolutely torches everybody. Bennett, quite a strong sprint, just not like he would have won, except Merlier was here. Like he still beat Coy, who was in his wheel. He still beat Pedersen and Dali, but Merlier is just way too quick, and he wins this stage ahead of Bennett. Pedersen third, Coy fourth, Dali, don't know where he was almost
I
all
did.
day.
Well, all day, I don't know. That's true. All day, that's a big deal. I don't know where he was all day. I didn't see him all day until in the last kilometer, and then he was in a terrible position. I think he was sprinting for seventh, eighth position by the time the sprint started, and he had a time to move up for a second there past people, but he decided not to and stay within the terrain, stay within the draft of the others. But because of that, he's staying in a position where he is not competitive for the victory. And after that final corner, and they go through the final corner, and the Lee, honestly, fastest sprint of anybody, but he was in the draft a tiny bit. He didn't have full draft though. I say if the Lee is near Merlier here, we get a really close sprint between the two. Because the Lee looked like a very powerful sprint here.
Yeah, I think Dali can challenge him, but Merlier, perfect timing, perfect placement, wasn't the perfect lead out, but they made it work, and he was quicker than the other guys there. This sort of versatile, even more so, sprinters, Matthews, Cockard, Garcia, Cortina, 6th, 7th, 8th, then Groves 9th, Demar 10th. Alpecin did work all day for Groves. Bora didn't work. It was Lotto, Soudal, Quickstep, and Alpecin de Koenig working on the front today with de Klerk, de Gent, and a variety of Alpecin riders. So Jakobsen's going to be going to Driedaagse Brugge de Panna Koksteder instead of the Latour, right?
Yeah. It's a bit changed now. It's now 1 day, but well, it was never 3 days in the first place.
They still called it 3 days.
It was never 3 days in the first place. This fucking race. Anyway, Jakobsen, Merlier. I feel like the pressure's on Jakobsen. Let's be honest about it. I don't know how much Merlier actually wants to ride Grand Tours. That's a factor that I don't.
Maybe he's like, it's too long, bro.
And it can't be fucked. But aren't there quite a bit of like flat sprints in like the first 2 weeks of the tour that a Merlier could be competitive at anyway?
There's like 8. It's going to be terrible. I don't
Merlier
know why
has
they
to
do
go to the tour. Based on the current performances, Merlier's better than Jakobsen at the moment. That can change towards the Tour de France. Jakobsen can get into the groove again, can get into it again, but so far I haven't been impressed by Jakobsen, despite that victory at San Juan, if I recall. Just not the case right now. And
he fakes a mechanical on this stage, right? This is the type of finish he fakes a flat on.
I don't know. But when it comes to the Lee as well, it's like a lot of people are saying he's too young, don't send him to Grand Tours yet. But I saw Ewan in the GP Montserrat getting beaten by Thijssen after a perfect lead out for Ewan. Thijssen is a solid sprinter now. He's not some rookie sprinter like back in the day when he was riding for Lotto. But Ewan getting beaten once again. By the way, similar situation as in UAE. In UAE, he celebrates, thinks he won, and then doesn't win. In GP Montserrat, he actually gets interviewed as the winner, but is not the winner. So Ewan must have like some PTSD. But the Lee going to the Tour, I don't think the parkour is perfect for the Lee sprints, but he's sprinting better than Ewan right now. Hey, let's be honest about it.
But Ewan said on Grant Thomas' podcast that there's tiers of sprinters. There's like the A tiers, and they're allowed to contest the sprints, and they're allowed to fight for wheels. It was Bennett, Ewan, what was it? Marcel Kittel, who else? Andre Greipel, and then there's people like Herben Thijssen who just get in the way.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that?
I don't say anything to that. If I say something, I get in trouble. Nah.
All right, Jose. I mean, what about MSR? Forget the Tour. What about in 2 weeks?
We literally had this conversation before. The Lee versus Ewan.
I've amnesia.
We had this conversation before.
I'm in Andorra. I don't remember anything I said.
There's no way Ewan rides for the Lee. Not that it would help if Ewan was riding for the Lee in the first place after the Pacho. If someone's attacking and Ewan's pacing for you, you're fucked in the first place. But the only way that...
Oh, yeah, we did talk about this.
Honestly, tactically, it makes more sense for the Lee to pace for Ewan after the Pacho, because if Ewan paces for the Lee won't win anyway.
Yeah.
But
Dali
the
can,
least
like,
better.
go with Sturtevant moves, can't he?
Yeah.
Can Dali attack on the Poggio? Like, I think he could.
I don't.
Dali has to go.
He probably just has to follow the punchy riders. I think that would be a win already.
Pretty crazy rider. Anyway, back to Paris-Nice. Tomorrow we have from Bazinville to Fontainebleau, going from the west of Paris down to the south. Now, there can be windy conditions and crosswinds here, but the forecast is that they aren't too strong, like 10 to
Yeah.
15 k's an hour. It's rolly. This is a much more nailed on sprint stage if there is no wind, because there's no climbs of note. So 164 k's. Hopefully there is wind though, because otherwise it will be another sprint stage, and we'll see more traditional trains get set up. If so, I still think Merlier will be the heavy and should be the heavy favourite. If that happens, Lotto need to get Dali in better position. They did sign Guarnieri. It's not working, but we'll see tomorrow how that goes. Milan also poor today, I think.
Yeah.
I expected much more.
I feel like Bahrain's not using him the way he should be used.
He got dropped.
Also, but when it comes to classics, he wasn't
How?
used in the way that he should be used. I don't know. He wasn't good enough anyway today, so it doesn't matter really. When it comes to tomorrow, I agree with you. Merlier could win, but if it's like dependent on lead out, Bennett could compete just because Van Poppel is in front of him as well. So, but then again, if Merlier's on the wheel of Bennett, Merlier wins anyway.
How much time do you think Jumbo will take in the TTT?
I don't know. I
Me
think
either. Not my job.
45? No, probably not 45 seconds.
No, I think about 45 is possible. 30 to 45, maybe more.
No, that's a lot. 6 seconds already taken by Pogacar back, so he's
He'll
going
take
well.
10 on stage whatever, but Jonas might take some bonus. He could be racked. He'll take 10 on stage 8. There's intermediates in stage 8. He could
Yeah.
rack up some bonus seconds across these 8 stages, man.
Gonna be a fun Pyrenees, that's for sure.
Okay, that's all from us today. Pyrenees stage 1 in the books. Pogacar and Vingegaard. Some light jabs. You see that if you're watching on YouTube. Bang. Yeah, you didn't react. That little jab. They're going to keep the haymakers behind. Hopefully they'll see some crosswind haymakers tomorrow. They've both brought the teams certainly for it, and Quickstep never like to shy away from some crosswind chaos. But thanks to Zwift and you all for listening. As always, we'll see the recap tomorrow. Ciao.